All right, so I'm really excited to finish this series. I'm excited about what we were talking about today as we finish the series that we've been in for the last couple of weeks called Unstrapped. And here's what I've been saying all along. If you've listened to any of the messages from January on, I've had one real consistent theme, and that is that we are all on paths. You remember me saying this? You are on paths right now. And at the end of this year, your paths that you're on are going to bring you somewhere. Some of you are going to hit the end of this year and you're going to look back and say, that was a good year. Because of the choices you're making right now to get on the right paths, it's going to bring you places you want to go. Some of you are going to hit the end of the year and you're going to say, that wasn't a good year. I'm not where I want to be. And it's because of the paths that you're on. And we are on lots of paths. We're on relational paths, right? We're on emotional paths, we're on financial paths, we're on spiritual paths. Your paths are bringing you somewhere. And so what I've been doing so far this year is I want to help us get on good paths. And the series financially has been about getting on a good path. And we've talked about debt, and we've talked about how to get your spending under control and how to live on a budget. And we've talked about all these things. The Bible has so much practical teaching on money. And we've talked, last time we were together, we talked about contentment. If you missed that one, please go watch that one. Go to our website and watch that one. You can see and learn a lot because this is not a content world, and it's not going to make any money if you're content. But you're not going to have a good life if you're not content. And so we talked about that and how contentment is a critical element to get on a good path financially. And so today we're going to finish up with something that may surprise you. When I talk about getting on good paths financially, one of the most important things you can do is to start to be more generous. Which some of you are like, well, wait a second. If I'm on a good path financially, shouldn't I just get more here? Because that's going to get me what I want at the end of the year. And it's counterintuitive. So I'm going to tell you something that if you're new to your faith, and matter of fact, if you're just exploring your faith with us here or watching online, you're just exploring your faith, I want you to know that what I'm going to say to you isn't really for you today. Okay, I rarely say that, but I'm going to say it today. I rarely say that, but you need to understand that if you're just beginning your spiritual journey, this message isn't for you. I hope you will find things that are interesting in it. You will learn a lot. I'm not denying that, but this really isn't what you need to be focusing on. So I'm glad you're here. If you want to fake a coughing fit, I've said before, and leave, you can do that. It's like, off you go. That's okay too. But if you stay, you're going to learn some things. But I want you to understand, because I'm going to teach on a concept in the Bible called tithing, which literally means the first tenth of what you earn, you give back to God at the place that you worship. So if you're just beginning your spiritual journey, this is not for you. But I'm not. And many, many, many people who are here or are going to be watching this, they're not beginning their spiritual journey. They've been on this journey for a while. And it doesn't seem to fit the idea of a path leading me somewhere good. It's counterintuitive. So let me explain what I mean by that. I first heard about this, and I've been a Christian since I was a teenager. I was a freshman in high school when somebody explained the good news of Jesus to me, and it clicked. And I became a follower of Jesus as a freshman in high school. Somewhere along the way, somebody explained this concept of tithing to me, and I'm like, okay, that's what God wants me to do. I'll just start doing that. And so I really started with my first paycheck when I first had my first job. So from the age of 21 to the age of 46, I tithed. Every year, I never missed, I never compromised. For 25 years, I did this. When we started out, my salary was $10,000 a year, no benefits, and I tithed. And then as the church grew and I was able to be paid more, I just continued to increase my tithe, literally a tenth of what I earned, and gave it back to the church as an expression of worship to God. And I always did this for 25 years of my life until suddenly in 2016, I found myself to be a single dad with 2 kids at home, and I was scared. And I stopped tithing. I stopped. I always knew that I would come back to it. I always knew that someday I would be giving again at that level. I always knew that. But I was scared because I'm like, how am I going to take care of my kids? And this is scary. And it's a single income now. And man, I don't know if I can do this. And then slowly over time, I began to increase my giving each year. So the first year I did what I call tipping, and that's not meant to be an insult at all, right? It's like I'm tipping God. Hey God, hey, thanks for the Milky Way. Here's a $20 bill. All right, so that's cool. I got to see that. It's like it's just a little bit here and there to just start back out because I had to do something and I was too afraid to do what I really felt like God wanted me to do. And then over the years, then it went up and up and up until finally over a year ago, I committed all the way back in, and for the last year, the first tenth of what I earn from any source, I give back to God at the place I worship. So I'm back there. So I've done both. I've done both. I have not tithed, and I've tithed. And I can tell you which one's better. And some of you are on a path that's going to bring you somewhere at the end of the year that's going to fill you, that you're going to be able to tell incredible stories about God's activity in your life because of this decision. Now again, that may not make any sense to you at all right now, so hold that thought. Here's what my theme is today. I'm going to show you, and this is more like a story. That's why I filled everything in for you today. Normally I have notes to fill in. You're not filling anything in. It's all done for you because I just want to kind of tell you my story. Why I did this and why I think you should consider this as well. So, welcome to those of you who are watching on PenulChurch.life. If you haven't turned it off already, glad you're there. Hold on. Those of you who are watching on YouTube as well, this is more significant than most people give it the time and attention. So I really want you to consider this, and I want you to understand why I do it. So the first thing I do is I do this because I believe that God wants me to do this. And so for those of you who are just, again, beginning your faith, maybe you've made a faith commitment to Jesus and you're just like, okay, I want to understand what he asks. Well, the Bible teaches, and again, tithe, the word literally means a tenth. That's what the word literally actually means. It means 1/10 of what you earn. And so in the Bible, it says things like this. It says, God spoke through the prophet Malachi to the nation of Israel and said, bring all the tithes into the storehouse so there'll be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I'll pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. Now, there's several things in that verse that are really important. First, did you know the Bible says don't ever test God? Do you know that? Except for this. The one place in the Bible where it's okay to test God is when it comes to finances. Did you know that? And I love the imagery. It's like God in heaven sees one of us going, all right, God, I'm going to trust you with what I have. I'm going to give He opens the windows of heaven. It's like, do you know there are windows in heaven? It was figure of speech, obviously. But it's like, I'm going to open the windows. I'm going to start throwing stuff down to you. Matter of fact, I'm going to put so much down there, you can't even contain all that I'm going to give you. That's the promise, right? I didn't make that up. I'm not misinterpreting it. It's what he says. But notice it's a conditional promise. He says, if you do this, then I do this. Now, we all want him to do this, right? I would like that. God, go ahead and open them windows. Pour that blessing out on me. But it's conditional. You do this, then I do this. You get my help when you do this. And so sometimes Christians come along and they're like, well, wait a second, that was written to the nation of Israel. They had a temple, and so they were bringing it to the place where they worshiped, which was the temple. That just doesn't apply to us anymore. And there are a lot of Christians who think this. They're like, nope, I don't have to do this. It's not for me anymore. And so it was only for the nation of Israel. But the problem with that is when you look at the Bible, you see this. Abraham tithed before the nation of Israel was even existed and before the law was given. He tithed. Jesus in the New Testament spoke positively about tithing in Matthew 23:23, and in the New Testament, giving is consistently way beyond just 1/10 of their income. So somebody like, I'm just going to do what the New Testament says. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not. Because in the New Testament, there was a widow who came and gave her offering at the temple, and Jesus saw it, and he said, that's what you should do, and she gave everything she had. So it's like 1/10 or everything. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Jesus, you know what he said to the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler came to him one day, and he said, well, Jesus said to him, sell all your possessions, give the money to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven, then come follow me. You going to do what it says in the New Testament? You're going to do what it says in 2 Corinthians 8? Do you know what happened in those verses? The Christians there heard about a need, and they figured out what we can give. We can afford to give this, and it says in the verses that they gave beyond their ability to afford it. So it's like, I know I can't afford to give this much. I'm just going to give it anyway and trust that God's going to make up the difference. So it's like, I'm not going to do this tithing thing. I'm going to do what it says in the New Testament. Oh, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. But that's the giving principle that's taught in the Bible. So the safest thing to do is just stick with the tithe. Don't try and do what it says in the New Testament to give way beyond. But this is what I believe the Bible teaches, and so this is what I want to do. I want to do what he says. Now, tied to that is this, because I believe God's promises to bless me if I do it. I believe that. You see, I always knew in the 3.5 years before, and especially in those 2 years when I wasn't tithing at all, there was a question that haunted me every time I gave the little bit of money that I was giving. I knew I had 2 options in my life, and you have these options today. I can keep it all and not get God's promises to help me. Every one of you has this option right now. And this is what I was doing. It's like, no, this is too scary. I'm going to just take care of this myself. I'm going to keep it and pay my own bills and get my kids back on their feet, get me on my feet. I'm just going to take care of this all myself. But then that promise is conditional. I'll give you when you do this. It's like, okay, so that's option A. I could keep it and not get God's promises. Or I could give and then receive God's promised help. And every time I wasn't doing what I knew the Bible told me to do, this was in my head, because I was wrestling with this. Do I actually believe that less, by giving it away, but I'll have less, with God's help will go further than more without his help? That was the question that haunted me over and over and over and over again. I had to wrestle with what I believed. Do I think that if I just keep it, so I have more for me and I don't have God's help, do I think that's a better situation for me than less because I've given, but I get his help? I couldn't escape the question. Because I know what I believe. I know what I believe. I believe that what he said is about, I'm going to open the windows of heaven. And I'm going to pour so much out that you don't have room to contain it all. I believe that. I believe this. 2 Corinthians 9, which is talking about their giving, he said, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully must also reap bountifully. This is another promise directly related to our giving, and it's an agricultural thing. And we don't, not too many farmers in the room here today, and yet the reality is, every farmer, it was an agricultural society 2,000 years ago when this verse was written, they understood this. If you go out tomorrow and you plant 1 seed of corn, your expected harvest is 1, right? And you hope that the bugs don't kill the 1. But you don't get a harvest like the right picture unless you've planted a lot, right? Does that make sense? That's his metaphor. You will reap what you sow financially. So if you are like this, and you're containing it and keeping it, then you'll reap from God in proportion to that. But if you open it up and you start giving, and then God will give back to you, it's his promise. So I believe that, and I want the right picture. That's what I want. So there's an element of faith in this, right? He makes this promise. He says, if you do this, then I'll do this. And so there's an element of faith. It's like, all right, well, if I believe God, then I got to actually do this, right? And so I started because I believe this. I believe that God will now provide for me. I believe that God will make my things last longer. I believe that. I will not know till heaven what he did, right? Because it's not like he's telling me, Brian, your dryer should have broke 6 months ago. But I have been holding that belt with my fingers, right? Your 2003 Pontiac Vibe, the 217,000 miles on it, those wheel bearings should have gone months ago. But I am making them stay, right? He's not telling me. But I believe it. That he is doing things right now that I can't even see and won't see till heaven. Because isn't it true that you can have a run where everything breaks, right? You ever have one of those? It's like, yeah, right. And our God says, no, I'll take care of things. Now, you won't know till heaven, but he will protect me. He'll open opportunities for me. He'll give back to me in more than just financial ways, but he'll also give back to me in financial ways. I believe all of this. So that's why I do it. Again, you got to decide what you believe. But then this one ties in. Now, by the way, if you're like, I love my numbers in order, I totally messed things up with this. Because as I got to my final memorizing, we'd already printed this, and I'm like, I'm going to change all the numbers now. So numbers are not going to be in order. So here's what I've said. He says to do it. He says, I promise I will take care of you if you do it. So The third thing for me is actually number 6. So if you want to scribble out number 6 and write number 3, this is now how I demonstrate that I trust God. My faith is shown. Okay, he says he's going to do it, right? I heard the promises of God. Now, all of you have heard what he just promised, right? 2 of his promises. I'll open the windows of heaven for you. So you've heard what he's promised. Now you have to decide. I've made my decision. I believe the promises. I believe them. And if you believe them, then you act on them. So I've acted on the promises of God. I've heard them. I believe them. You cannot say you believe them and not do it, right? I believe he promises these things for me, but I'm not going to do it. Well, then you don't believe it. Your faith is lived out in your behavior. And I am not in any way trying to say this was easy. I journaled. Before I fully committed last year, I was dabbling. I was a dabbling tither. So I journaled about the very first time that I did it on November 5th, 2017. I wrote this in my journal. I said, I have not been tithing since I resigned. I've been too scared. But slowly, recently, I've started to give more. And yesterday at church, I wrote a full tithe from my last paycheck from Land's End. It was scary. It took faith. It was my first time doing it. And so I followed my steps about faith that I know, because faith is a choice. Did you know that? Faith is a choice. You choose in every situation whether you're going to trust God or not trust God. And here's what I wrote to myself. I acknowledged what my fear was. And this is everybody's fear. If I do this, I won't have enough. And so in my journal, I said, God, I'm afraid if I give this, I won't have enough. And then I told myself a faith story. And I asked myself this question, what do I really believe? And I said, I believe that if I give, God will give back. He will open the windows of heaven. And he'll just start chucking stuff down. You know, the Bible says that heaven is made of streets of gold. It's like, don't throw the bricks. But I mean, he'll just start giving. He'll just start giving. He will give. And then I said to him, I'm going to trust you before I even see what you do. Because here's what we want. We're like, God, you give to me and then I'll do this. And it's the other way around. We do this and then he takes care of us. It's not this way. It's we obey him, trust him, step out in faith, and then he shows up and does what he does. And so I just started trusting God, and then I wrote this prayer in my journal. Father, I'm looking forward to seeing you at work in my life because of my faith. Thank you so much. And I started to obey. So that's how this works, how faith works. And we're going to do this whole series on faith next. So you have to hold on to see what God did, but this is what I believe. It's why I do it. Before I ever saw God do anything, I knew what he wanted, I knew what he promised, and I just started obeying him. But those aren't the only reasons I started doing it. I actually believe that my giving lasts forever. I believe that. So I believe this year so far, in the first few months, 2 of my friends under the age of 60 have passed away. 2 of them. And you know, death, especially when it happens when it's so unexpected and younger, it's really shocking, and you are reminded of how ridiculous we are with our consumerism. Because do you know what percentage of the things my 2 friends left behind when they died? 100%. Absolutely everything. They brought nothing with them. The Bible is clear. You brought nothing into the world, you take nothing out of the world. And now somebody has to go through all their stuff, and you know where most of it's going to go, right? This is the reality. And death reminds you of this, and I've been really reminded of this. And you know, this is the year that I turned 50. So statistically, if we're doing like a curve, you know, the average age of a man in America is what, 82 is life expectancy. So it's like, whoa, I'm on the other side going down, and there's a gap here, right? It's like, huh. So what I've really been reminded of with these experiences this year is I'm temporary. Everything I own is temporary. Nothing I've accumulated here on earth is going to come with me, and most of it will be in a dumpster someday, right? I like this shirt, but it'll be in a dumpster someday, right? Gone. And yet, the Bible says very clearly that there's a way to change what you have from temporary into eternal. Because this isn't home. When we die, we go, when my two friends passed away, they were immediately in the presence of God forever. And that's home. That never ends. This time on earth races by. It's over in a moment, and then we go into eternity. And Jesus is so clear about how our giving affects this. He said, sell your possessions, give to those in need, and look at what it will do. It will store up treasure for you, not here on earth, but in heaven forever. Did you know that? When you give out of love, God transforms it. He keeps an account in heaven of everything you've given. It lasts for eternity. Now, he says that in some way that's going to really matter. When we get into heaven, it's going to matter. That what we've given out of love is going to be there waiting for us. I don't know what form that looks like. I don't know what that looks, but I know that that's where I'm going to want it. You think I'm going to want it here? You think in 30 years I'm going to care? I won't care at all. 40 years, I won't care at all. But I will really care forever in eternity, and giving transforms what I have from temporary into eternal. And that's what I want. I want everything I have stored up there as much as I can, and every time I give, I transfer it from earth to heaven. Now that ties into this one, because I want to be closer to God. And I don't know what your motive is, and again, spiritually you may just be beginning this whole spiritual journey. But my goal is not a church service. I'm glad you come to church services, but that's not my goal. At the end of the year, if all you say is spiritually, I went to church a lot, I'm going to feel like that's a disappointing statement. That's not my goal for you. It's not God's goal for you. What I want you to say at the end of the year is, I saw God's activity in my life in dramatic ways. When I picked up the Bible, there were so many times I felt like God was just over and over again saying things to me, and I learned so much from God this year. And I felt so close to God, and there were times where I felt so much of God's love that I just couldn't even put it into words. And I saw God move mountains in my life that I could never, ever, ever have moved, and he just did it. And that's what I want you to tell at the end of the year. And that comes from a relationship with God. And so much of American Christianity is about religion. I do these religious things. I go to a church service. I get baptized. I get confirmed. I take communion. I do these religious things, and then I've checked off my boxes, and I walk home and I live my life any way I want to live my life. And that has nothing to do with Christianity that Jesus came to start. He came to bring us a relationship with him. And your faith and your relationship with God is directly impacted by how you handle money. I didn't say this. Jesus said this. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So if you want your heart closer to God, you got to put your treasure where God is in heaven, and you do that by giving, right? When I'm doing this, I'm holding it all here. It's not going out. It's staying right here. And guess where my treasure is? On earth. Here. And so my relationship with God is directly affected by the giving in my life. Did you know that? He said, where your treasure is, there your heart is. You want your heart closer to God, which is what you want, because you can have a deeper relationship with God, then you have to let it go. And in giving it away, your relationship with God is affected by that. And I really want this. Two things I know that this does for me. First, it keeps money in the right spot in my life when I'm giving it away. Money is a great tool and a terrible god. Paul wrote this to this young pastor named Timothy. He said, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Let me ask you, do you think there are a lot of people in America that want to get rich? Yeah, right? Isn't that like the number one thing? I want to be rich. I want to be so rich that I can just do what I want and whenever I want to. And he says, if you make that your goal in life, your ambition in life, it's going to trip you up. It's going to cost you. And it really costs you spiritually. He said the love of money, not money itself, but when you love it like that, that's the root of all kinds of evil. And then he said some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many, many griefs. This is the sad reality. There are a lot of people who know that there is something real in God, and he just doesn't matter because they got to have more stuff. Because they got to have more money and more stuff. And if you gave people a choice today, Christians a choice between more stuff or more of God, unfortunately, way too many of us would choose the stuff. Choose the money. And by the way, you'll never know God from that perspective. It only works when you'd say, I choose God over anything else. Because when he's in the top spot, then you get God. You have supernatural experiences with God when he's in that top spot. It's what he wants for you. So when I'm giving it away, it breaks the grip of materialism in my life because I can't spend it because I just gave it away. It's not mine anymore. And it breaks that grip. And the other thing it does on the other side is it keeps God in that top spot because I'm obeying him and trusting in him and relying on him. And the Bible says the purpose of tithing is to teach you to always put God first in your life. And I want that. That's what I want. I want God to be in my top spot in my life because I want everything he has for me. I want a supernatural experience with God, not a ritual. And your money is affecting your faith. It's either because you're giving it away, it's either making your faith grow, or because you're just holding on to it, it's making your relationship with God smaller. It's affecting it. Jesus said it. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Okay, so I want to be closer to God, so I give it. God cannot be your God if money is your God. You do realize that, right? Jesus said you cannot serve both God and money. Didn't say it's hard to do it. He said it can't be done. So either God is your God or your money is your God, but both can't be. And money is a terrible God. So I don't want that. I want God as my God, so I give, I obey. The fourth one, the numbers are all goofy, I'm sorry. I really love this one because giving is how God has a plan to build his church, and I care about his church. You know, next year I will have been preaching for 30 years of my life. I care about his church. I care about what's happening in his church in America. I want to see his church get healthy and grow. And giving is a key part of that. Because I've told you before, Jesus came only to start one thing. You know that, right? He came to start one institution, and that's his church. He didn't come to start anything else. He said to Peter, one of his disciples, I say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And his picture of the church is so powerful that all the powers of hell can't even conquer it. Now, the church in America doesn't look all that powerful many times, right? Many of you have horrible stories about the churches you've been a part of. Many of you do. In fact, many of you don't even like this subject because of the abuses of money that have happened in churches, right? You've all either heard those stories or you've suffered through them yourself. And so sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's like, no, we just need a balanced view on this. But I am passionate about what happens to his church, and I want to see his church be healthy. And sometimes people are like, well, if God's so good, your God is so good, then why isn't he doing more to solve the problems in this world, right? Why? If you get into debates with people who don't believe in Jesus, this is one of the things they often say is like, well, why isn't he doing more? And here's what I want you to know. God has already done everything. He's already given everything needed to change the entire world that we live in through people who follow Jesus. So let me explain what I mean, because this is amazing. Look at this. The giving rate in America today is 2.5% for Christians. So I've showed you from the Bible, it's supposed to be at 10%, we're at 2.5%. So 2.5% of our income we give back to God. Okay? A little sad, it used to be better during the Great Depression. Isn't that a stunning statistic? We used to give more, Christians gave more during the Great Depression than we do now, when we stood in soup lines and bread lines. Isn't that an amazing statistic and blow you away? You know that's what happens, right? You know we can show you statistically that as your income goes up, your giving goes down. Isn't that crazy? Shouldn't it be the other way? Shouldn't it be income goes up and we're just more generous because we're so grateful? No. The more you get in America, the more you want to keep for yourself. That is what we know happens. But if Christians, just Christians, let me say that again. If only people who say they follow Jesus did what the Bible said, you want to know what we could do? If Christians alone tithed, it would bring an additional $165 billion. That's what it would turn into, just Christians. You know what we could do with $165 billion? $25 billion would relieve global hunger and preventable diseases in 5 years. No child ever would starve to death again. No child. When I was in India as a missionary, I stayed with this Indian family, and their daughter, she was 11 at the time, she had polio. Her legs were in these big braces. She could barely walk. A disease that none of us ever worry about in America. You know why? Because we just got a shot, and it prevented it from happening. But around the globe, they don't have that. But you know what we could do if we just gave at the level that God asked us to? We could eliminate hunger, and we could eliminate preventable diseases. Gone forever. And, that's not all. That's only $25 billion. Remember the number? 165? So $25 billion. So we could take $12 billion more and eliminate illiteracy in 5 years. Do you know the connection between poverty and illiteracy? You know this, right? If you have no educational opportunities, you are in big trouble. You're going to struggle with poverty all of your life. We could take care of it. $12 billion, we solve illiteracy. $15 billion would solve the world's water and sanitation issues. And it would still leave 100 to 110 billion left over to build buildings and run youth ministries and run life groups and everything else that churches do. And so here's the point. Everything that's needed to solve all of the major world's problems is already placed by God in the hands of people who say that they believe in him. Isn't that staggering? We could solve all the world's problems and still have that much left over. So the next time you hear somebody blaming God, it's not really his deal. He's already given us way more than we need to solve all of the world's problems. And I want to see the church be healthy. I want to see what the church can do. And it really matters to me because it matters to Jesus. So he gets this. And then there's one more, and this is really the critical one, and I've saved it for last because it creates a lot of passion inside of me. It's an expression of my gratitude to God, and I am so grateful to God. I feel like I live such a blessed life, and I am very grateful. I was reading an article, and the author said there are 7 reasons Christians don't give, and he said this was one of them. We don't recognize our abundance. That is so true in America. We just don't recognize just how incredibly, we don't recognize and have a hard time saying this, but this is the truth. Ready? I am crazy rich. I am only talking to rich people today. Now some of you are like, what? I am not rich. How can you say that? Well, hold that thought. Don't get up and walk out in anger because you got to let me show you what I mean. Did you see this? Did anyone see this news thing? This was fascinating. It was on CBS Morning Show a while ago, not that long ago, and what they were trying to do is show the wealth discrepancy between the wealthiest in America and the poorest in America. And so what they did is they went into a mall and they set up this pie, the pumpkin pie, and they cut it into 10 pieces, and then had people come up to the pie and say, all right, you guess, how much of the pie, if this pie, the 10 pieces represent the wealth in America, put them on where you think they fall on each plate. How much of the pie does the upper middle class have, the middle class have, the lower middle class, and the poorest? How much of the pie do they each have? And people were guessing, and of course they were guessing terribly wrong. Because then he finishes this thing, and you can see this is actually the setup. The wealthiest in America own 9 of the 10 pieces of pie. In other words, they have 9/10 of the wealth in America. So the upper 1% has 90% of all the wealth in America is in the hands of this 1%. And so it intended to be shocking, and people were shocked. They're like, oh! And then he's like, well, shouldn't we tax them? Yeah, making $50 million or more, we should tax them and take from them. And I don't have a political bone in this. I don't make $50 million a year. I have never had any plans to have $50 million. So go ahead and do whatever you want with them. This is not a political comment, but it actually made me really mad when I watched this. Because this is what we think. We think, oh, they've got it all. And this is unfair. And we need to get that 1%. Really? You think that's what we need to do? Again, politically, I don't care what they do. But what I have a real issue with is the non-stop comparing up. This is what I have a real issue with, because we make ourselves so discontent and so miserable and so angry because someone has more. Newsflash, someone will always have more. Always, 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 always. And you are not suffering because you're not in that upper 1%. Matter of fact, let me give you a little perspective here, because this, you see, riles me up a little bit. You want to do something for interesting, go write this. Now write this down on your notes. globalrichlist.com. Write that down on your notes. globalrichlist.com. And notice in the comments what it says is, don't just put in what you make annually, put in what you make plus all the benefits you receive. How much is your healthcare? How much is your healthcare worth? How much is your dental or vision if you have those benefits? You have student loans if you've ever received. Put all of that on there. And then here's what you discover when you put it in there, because it was like, yeah, we need to get the rich. Okay, well, here you go. If you make $17,785 a year in America, do you know what percentage of wage earners you now fall into around the globe? You're in the top 5% of wage earners on the planet at 17,000. So you graduate from high school and you just go to work at Quick Trip. You'll make more than $17,000 a year starting out, and you will be among the wealthiest 5% on the planet. But let's say someday something crazy happens. Let's say the average full-time employee at Walmart makes $30,000 a year. So let's say you're living the dream. You get a full-time job at Walmart, and you're making now $30,000 a year. I know, ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. How could anyone ever make that much money? Well, once you make that much money, you're the 1%er. Yeah, we need to get the 1%, don't we? We need to get them. You're them. You're all them. We are ridiculously wealthy in America. Oh, by the way, if someday, fantasy among fantasies, you make it to all the way up to $42,000 a year for total take-home pay, not counting benefits. Not counting benefits. If someday you could live the dream and make it all the way to $42,000, you now are in the top 0.5% of wage earners on the planet. You are wealthier than 99.5% of every human being in existence today. So tell me again about how hard it is to be poor in America. Tell me how you need to keep more. Right? We don't have all that we need or all that we want, right? We don't have enough money to have all that we want, but we certainly have all the money we need to have what we need. We are incredibly rich. Are you grateful for all that you have? And by the way, you know where that came from? The Bible says, command those who are rich with things in this world not to be proud. Tell them to put their hope in God, not in uncertain riches. Because God, where does it come from? God richly gives us everything for us to enjoy. It's not about guilt today. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. If you feel guilty, I'm failing. It's about gratitude to the God who's let you have it. And responsibility, because then he goes on to say, tell the rich people, by the way, that's all of you. Hey, rich people, be rich in doing good deeds. Be generous, ready to share. And oh, by the way, by doing that, you'll be saving a treasure for yourselves in heaven as a strong foundation for your future. And oh, by the way, then when you do this, then you get to have the life that is truly life. How many materialistic, discontented Americans do you know that are living the life? None. No life there. This will not bring you life. It's this that brings you life. Because then you get God's activity in your life, and everything we have, everything I own, everything I temporarily have in my hand for this short time on earth, everything temporarily that God has put in my hand is I have only because of him. If I'd have been born in New Delhi, India, you think I'd have what I have? If I'd have been born in Indonesia, you think I'd have what I'd have? If I'd have been born in Nigeria, do you think I'd have what I have? We have what we have only because of God and his incredible grace. And it is a responsibility. And out of gratitude to the God of love, we give back to accomplish his purposes. So that's why I started. That's why I started. And I've done this long enough to know that it's farming. You don't put a seed in the ground today and expect a harvest tomorrow, right? If you do, you are a bad farmer. May not be the field you want to go into, right? You know that I plant seeds now for harvesting future. So remember, originally this was supposed to be done last week. I was going to do this message last week and start a new series, and then got snowed out. It's like, okay, well, I got a purpose in that. So when I started this series, I told you that I really made some choices last year to get on some different financial paths. I had some debt from my divorce, and I've been really seriously paying that off because I want time to pass. And I'm making these automated payments, so debt is getting paid off, and I'm building my savings up so that if I have an emergency, I'm not in trouble. And I'm giving back to God at the place where I worship. I'm tithing. I'm on paths, and they're all bringing me somewhere. And then all I could see is what I could do, and I wasn't even thinking about what God could do. So my debt, I'm on a path that will pay off my debt by July. July, I will be debt-free again, other than my mortgage, be debt-free by July. So I'm really excited about that. But you know what happens? You trust God. God just opens the windows of heaven and says, here, test me. See if I won't do more than you can even expect. Well, I work in a department where we get a quarterly bonus. Last quarter, our quarterly bonus was zero. Zero. It's like, okay, can't budget on that. Well, so I was prepping this message and doing my normal stuff, and then Friday morning I opened up my email and they announced our quarterly bonus for my department this week. It was 10 times larger than my average bonus, 3 times larger than any bonus I've ever gotten. And Thursday, when I get my paycheck, I'm debt-free. Unbelievable. I know, right? I never saw that coming. Never. I couldn't wait to tell you. Try me. See if I won't throw open the windows of heaven and give you so much that you won't even be able to take it all in. There's a lot of gratitude to God for that one. Never saw it coming. Now again, the world would look at me and say, well, that's just a coincidence. And it's like, all I know is that when I live by faith, coincidences happen. When I trust God, coincidences happen. You can trust God. He is a God of love who loves you just as you are. So again, I don't know where you're at spiritually. I do not want this to be like a deal breaker. Sometimes people never come back to church after hearing a message about this. It's like, why? Just say, God, I'm not going to do it. That's your choice. You don't have to stop your faith journey because of money. But I do want you to consider it because I believe in a God who does these things. I believe in this God, and I believe that every promise he's made you is true, and if you'll trust him, you'll see him. And I want at the end of the year, I want you to tell stories like the one I just told. I want that for you. So again, for some of you, this is like a whole new thing. Some of you have never heard this before. It's like, what do I do now? It's like, start moving in that direction. For me, I was tipping, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all when I say it. It just kind of makes me laugh. So I was tipping, and then I was giving, and then I was tithing. And I just kept moving in that direction until I got where I wanted to be. And I live on a budget, and I live below my means, and I save, and I give. And for some of you, that's the path that you need to be on. Because it'll take you where you want to go. Because wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Let me have you all bow your heads as we finish today. Some of you, though, this is the first time you've either tuned in and are watching online, or maybe somebody recommended the site and you just started watching, or you're just exploring your faith here with us. Believe me, I'm telling you right now, faith is everything. If you take the smallest amount of faith, Jesus said faith as small as a mustard seed, just a speck of faith, and you aim it at God, you get God. And he will do things in your life that are supernatural, that cannot be accounted for in any other way other than God. And you go, wow. And that's what I want for you. And this God proved how much he loved you by giving his only son 2,000 years ago. Jesus came to pay a debt for all of humanity that we could never pay. God is love, and to be with him, we have to be perfectly like him, and we are not. Unless you're going to claim that you have only been loving every decision your entire life. None of us have. We have fallen so short of that, and God, incredibly, sent his son to die on a cross to pay for what we've done that's wrong. There was an exchange of life. He died so that we could be forgiven and live. And if you will take the smallest amount of faith and aim it at Jesus, you will get Jesus. And maybe this is the day to make that decision. To take the small faith that you have and aim it at Jesus and say something like this in your heart to him. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I get it. I have been so unloving with my words and my thoughts and my choices. I can't even count how many things I've done in my life. But Jesus, I heard you died on a cross for me. Please forgive me. Come make your home inside of me. I'm taking the faith I have and I'm aiming it at you because I want you. In Jesus' name, amen.